Okay, welcome again in a series of lectures ABC Vestibular in third part. We start with Harold Schukenschmidt. I'm sure most of you are familiar with him. He was an extraordinary otologic surgeon, otopathologist, and master of temporal bone dissection. Great contribution to the ear surgeries, stapedectomy, tympanoplasty, labyrinthectomy, and others, all developed by him. He also was a great researcher on traumatic hearing loss. With his colleagues, they discovered the efferent auditory pathway, and he explained the pathology of the common vestibular disorders. He was born and lived his early years in a farming area, used to work to be able to sponsor his education. Before residency training, he served 2 years as a general medical officer and 2 years as a flight surgeon with the 15th Air Force in the Mediterranean Theater in World War II. He was awarded the Soldier's Medal for his heroic rescue of a pilot who was trapped in a burning B-24. Superhero regarding his ability of hard working. Schukenschmidt postulated a mechanical mechanism termed copiolisthesis for benign paroxysmal positional vertigo. He argued that when the head is upright, inorganic particles detached from the otoconial layer by spontaneous degeneration or head trauma gravitate to and become settled on the copula of the posterior semicircular canal, which is situated directly inferior to the utricle. In fact, he found basophilic deposits precipitating on the copula of the posterior canal in individual patients. Here the basophilic deposits in the copula, that was in post-mortem studies of patients with BPV. And that is the drawing published in his textbook, Pathology of the Ear, edition 1974 edition. But unfortunately, this was wrong. This drawing was inaccurate and was mistake. That's why they corrected in the edition 1993. So here is the otoconia on the utricular side. The dixal bike, it's deflect the cochlea, triggering the symptoms and nystagmus. In vestibular neuritis, Schukenschmidt and Kuchmura found cell degeneration of one or more vestibular nerve trunks in post-mortem studies, which suggested that the cause may be a viral infection of the vestibular nerve, similar to those producing Bell's palsy and sudden sensorineural hearing loss. And here, this is the atrophied vestibular nerve fibers. They also make a good drawing, which is valid up till now, about the blood supply to the inner ear, which is really very important and very crucial to understand many disorders related to the inner ear, especially the ischemic events which could happen to the inner ear. In Meniere's disease, Schukenschmidt investigated the relationship between scarring labyrinthitis or blockage of the endolymph flow and the endolymphatic hydrops. He explained the frequently benign course of Meniere's disease. And here is a model. The drawing was made from a three-dimensional model developed from serial microscopic sections of the inner ear of a patient with Meniere's disease. So you can see here the hydrops. Is it the famous book, Pathology of the Ear? Okay, so now we'll talk about Joseph McClure. And we use McClure-Bagnini or Bagnini-McClure test for the horizontal canal BPV. He's from Western Ontario, Canada. He developed semicircular canal or BPV model. He put the canalolithiasis theory. He described the horizontal canal BPV and named after him the McClure-Bagnini test or Bagnini-McClure test for the horizontal canal BPV. So that is The paper published in 1979, The Mechanisms of Benign Paroxysmal Volitional Vertigo by Hall and McClure. Benign paroxysmal volitional vertigo is a disorder of the vestibular labyrinth. The clinical features can be explained by an abnormality in the posterior semicircular canal under the influence of gravity. A density differential between the endolymph and the copula will cause displacement of the copula when it changes in head position occur. The presence or absence of fatigability is a useful test that it helps define etiology, prognosis, and therapy. At the risk of adding yet another classification of nystagmus to the literature, we submit the division of BPV into two types, fatigable and non-fatigable, which simplify and rationalize the management of this common condition. And here is the model. So the water bottle represents the utricle and the circular tubes represent the posterior and anterior semicircular canals on the left. With subject sitting up, the mercury lies at the bottom of the posterior canal next to the copula. That's in the right, and with the head back, the mercury moves away from the copula, causing the copula to deviate away from the utricle, which in turn causes excitatory stimulation of the afferent nerve source, of the afferent nerve. McClure model, rounded tubes and water bottles to represent a free semicircular canal and utricle, and the mercury to represent water bottle to represent the three semicircular canals and utricle, and the mercury to represent the free-floating otolith debris. The canalolithiasis model clearly showed how debris could enter the canal side of the posterior canal with the head extended backward, and how it could move back to the utricle with positions of the model, but they didn't talk about repositioning maneuver. Lauren Barnes, which I have the honor and pleasure meeting him in person. He's still practicing in Western Ontario. Posterior semicircular canal occlusion for intractable benign paroxysmal volitional vertigo. So in that paper, they reported that benign paroxysmal volitional vertigo is most often a self-limited disorder arising from the posterior semicircular canal of the undermost ear in the whole-pike position. Some individuals with this disorder have severe and protracted symptoms requiring more than expectant therapy. We described two patients with intractable BPV and profound sensory neural hearing loss in the affected ear treated by transmastoid posterior semicircular canal occlusion. Post-operatively, both were relieved of their BPV and demonstrated preserved lateral semicircular canal function as measured by the electronystagmography. We feel this new procedure provides a simpler and possibly safer alternative to singular neuroectomy and should be given a future consideration in the treatment of intractable BPV in a normal hearing ear. So they have been the first people to publish or to develop the posterior canal occlusion procedure for intractable BPV. And during that surgery, with sequential computer-generated photographs taken from an intraoperative video of a fenestrated posterior semicircular canal, they showed by image the otoconial debris. Here it's one mass, and when they touched it or with a probe, it becomes small fragments. So all the key information for understanding the mechanism of BPV was known early in the 20th century, but it was not until near end of the century until a cure was discovered. So started by Thomas Branded, which also I have the pleasure of meeting him in person, and Robert Daroff from America, Thomas Branded from Germany. Both they are neurologists, and they published the Branded Daroff exercises, which still be used in some clinics up till now. So that was the first maneuver or the first physical therapy for management of BPV. Then in 1988, Alan Simon published or developed his Simont maneuver for the posterior canal PPV. And this is the demonstration of the Simont maneuver. So that is the first position, then this is the second position, and then this is the third position. This is for right posterior canal PPV. And that's another image with some explanations again, but here is the mechanism of it. So in that one, then here the autoconia, or the debris moved in the semicircular canal, then it was with the inertia, with the fast movement to the third position, it could brought back into the utricle. Then John Ebley, he published his maneuver on 1992, and that is 1992. That it was this is like 5 or 6 steps. So that was the maneuver. Then after that, it became little modified. So from in the sitting position is the clot of calcium carbonate crystal lies at the bottom, most position within the posterior canal. Movement to the head-hanging position causes the clot to move away from the copula, producing an excitatory burst of activity in the ambulatory nerve from the posterior canal. Ambulofugal displacement of the copula. Each subsequent position it changes causes the clot to move further around the canal and finally into the utricle. So the Ebley maneuver uses the gravity to move the debris to the utricle. And this is the modified or modified Ebley maneuver. So as you see, that is for the right posterior canal PPV. So from sitting to the right dextral bike, turning the head 90 degree to the left, then another 90 degree to the left, then bringing the patient again in the sitting position. So lessons from this series of lectures and from the development of treatment for PPV from historical perspectives. So we learned that clinical science is missing, just like all other areas of science, with missed opportunities, blind alleys, serendipitous findings, and academic intrigue. Can we learn from the mistake of others? Maybe not. There is some truth in saying that those who don't know the history are destined to repeat it. Thank you.